Picture this, it's 2011 and you're either watching the Harry Potter movie,
Yeah, beat his ass, Harry!
or you're playing one of the following games that also came out this year. Oh my god, what a year for gaming. Or, if you're me, you're watching Jeff Hardy do things that even to this day you still don't really understand how a human does. I mean, I'm sorry, what? But whilst 2011 was seemingly a great year for movies, art, media, TV, and particularly gaming, well, it was only going to get better for the medium.
What you've come to know as NGP, our next generation portable, is officially named PlayStation Vita.
It's the success of the incredibly successful, incredibly amazing PSP. I bet this thing's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, so it turns out the PS Vita was not only the complete opposite of successful, it was also apparent that Sony hated this little machine so much that they made it apparent to everyone after a couple years
That they were gonna burn this thing straight to the ground.
But hold up, you may be thinking, how the hell did we even get here, brother? And you may be thinking, how does a basically better version of an already incredible thing
Fail so miserably.
Well, we're going to take a look at that. And we're actually, in fact, going to take a look at how this may even be Sony's biggest failure. Yeah, bigger than this. So yeah, let's jump in. Okay, so to firstly understand why so many people, including my young self at the time, were so excited for the PS Vita, you kind of have to realize how Sony were marketing this thing and what it actually had to follow up on from its predecessor. You see, before the Vita was even announced, there was kind of a little handheld that Sony had made prior to it that I mean, I don't know if you'd ever heard of it. Like, it's kind of unknown. Some people call it like the PlayStation Portable. I think it's commonly known as the PSP. God, this thing is beautiful. Ignore the damage and, you know, scraps and tape and everything. I beat the ever-living hell out of this thing, but my God, does it still just look beautiful. You see, the PSP is without a doubt one of the greatest handhelds ever made in gaming, and I mean, if you doubt that, the evidence kind of speaks for itself, with this little handheld right here having sold over 80 million consoles, units, right? That's a lot of PSPs! This machine was mind-blowing. I mean, not only was it a damn PS2 in your pocket, but man, did this thing look sleek. It had a bunch of cool versions, and I mean, even as a 22-year-old grown man now, I still want the Monster Hunter one, because I mean, how could you not? It looked great, it was comfortable, it was portable, and man, did this thing just have an insane library of games. The GTA games, where I actually owned this one and this one. The Daxter games, the God of War games, which I was told from personal research and just like from people I spoke to, that the God of War PSP games were kind of like the first ever handheld games. Well, not the first ever, but a first bunch, a big collection of handheld games that kind of proved handhelds can kind of do their own thing and not just have cheap ports, and they can be greater than just a handheld port. Again, that's just my own research. Please let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong with that, but that's what I got told, but I wasn't really playing God of War around this time period. Sony backed the PSP for years, and I mean, like, you'd be insane not to, right? Because, like, not only for Sony was it an insane cash cow, but people loved this thing. So much, in fact, they made different versions of the PSP. I'm gonna pull out another one, and I'm talking about a console. This bad boy, the PSP Portable. Can anyone explain to me, like, why and who this was for? Like, I never thought the PSP was too chunky or not portable enough anyway. Like, what and who is this for? Is it supposed to be like a phone? Is it supposed to just be, like, cool? I mean, admittedly, as a kid, I thought the sliding thing was the coolest thing ever, but, you know, I'm sure adults at the time don't really care or didn't care, but again, even as a 22-year-old man, man, does this thing look cool when you slide it. But let me just quickly say, the reason why I'm talking about the PSP so much isn't just because it's a great console or great handheld, it's because whatever handheld Sony made had to follow up from this.
Hey, boss, wanna go around?
Yeah, this. a handheld which people quite literally treated better than probably some family members they have. Like, that's not an insane thing to say. I know who you are out there. And whilst many had said that creating a successor to the amazing PSP would be an impossible feat, well, in 2011, when Sony announced the Vita, it looked like they might have just done it. This thing was labeled as the future. A beautiful OLED screen, a beautiful machine with great specs, dual sticks, a touchscreen because it's 2011, of course it has to have a touchscreen, and a weird backpad thing that even to this day, I'm still not really sure why it was there, but fuck it, we bought. People when this were announced were amazed because not only did this mean that it was going to be the next evolution from the already amazing PSP, but handheld gaming in general at this point was in a fantastic spot because, you know, some would say from the other side, Nintendo were kind of cooking with the 3DS, like some would say. You see, the PS Vita at this point was getting an insane amount of hype because, I mean, to be honest, it looked like just a beefed up, caked up, roided up upgrade to the incredible PSP. And you see, people were also excited because the launch titles for this machine looked amazing. I mean, it was going to be launching with an Uncharted game, which just looked stunning. Killzone Mercenary actually looked fucking wild. And my god, Gravity Rush or Tearaway deserve something because man, were those cool ass games. Honestly, heading up to its release, the Vita had an insane amount of hype, and not just from Sony fans, but fans of the gaming handheld genre as a whole. Because people had got in their head that this was not only going to be the next jump in handheld gaming, but also the next evolution, an even bigger evolution than from what we were seeing from Nintendo, because not only had people just thought that, but like Sony kind of sold it that way. And so, the official worldwide release of the Vita happened. Yeah, I think kind of looked like from the get-go, it was quite apparent. Maybe not everything seemed like it was gonna be what people kind of thought it was. Okay, so December the 17th of 2011 is when the Vita released in Japan, and then February the 22nd of 2012 is when it officially released worldwide. And yeah, how do I say this without being overdramatic? This thing at launch flopped fucking harder than Anthem did, okay? I'm just gonna say it. Okay, alright. I am being overdramatic, but man, did the Vita just not sell well at all. Well, yes, it did look great and had some great games at launch. The problems with the Vita were pretty apparent from the get-go. You see, whilst people loved this thing, there were a lot of problems with it. And the first one was this thing was not cheap by any means. It launched for around $250 with just the box, nothing else, and for inflation costs, that's around $350 today. The system does and still does have an abysmal memory card system. Like, you needed to use a memory card to even use this thing properly, which, by the way, they were not only ridiculously expensive, you could only use these like PlayStation branded ones, which were a nightmare, because the top end storage ones, which I mean you basically needed anyway to use compared to the rest, were ridiculously expensive. I mean, $100 for a fucking memory card. Are you insane? Do you know how many units I can buy for that? Apparently just one. Sony having some great launch titles early on, years later really didn't back the system like it did at the start with these big AAA games. Like, yes, it did launch with some great AAA games, but after a while, the output for these AAA games on the Vita were glaringly lower. Okay, so I think unless I messed up, and please do let me know if I did, after like a decade of nearly support for this system, the Vita only had like 10 to 15 actual main AAAs built for it. And I'm not counting ports. I'm not counting ports. We're not counting ports. We're not doing that. Like, yeah, you can count the ports, but are we really going to do that? Like, yeah, you and me right now, let's have a one-to-one. Are we really going to count ports? And also, sadly, this meant if Sony themselves weren't going to back the Vita, that also meant other big studios and developers were probably thinking, why the hell would I make a game for this console if not only no one's going to play it, but Sony themselves aren't invested to back the thing? In the wise words of a great company, if this ship is sinking, matey, there's no way I'm making a game for it if Sony themselves aren't even gonna try and save their ship. Arr, which I mean is kind of fair. Also, at this point in time, smartphone gaming was only getting bigger and bigger, which definitely affected the Vita because, I mean, why would you buy a Vita, which is already kind of expensive, when for $3 on your already existing tablet, phone, iPod, or Ouya, what do you know about the Ouya, you can get Plants vs. Zombies and experience this. And you have other stuff as well, like Sony not really knowing how to market the Vita well, particularly during the early years. A lot of people during this time kind of report Sony not really knowing how to market this thing well. Whereas their competitors, let's just say Nintendo know a thing or two about marketing, just a little bit. Yeah, and it also doesn't help that during this time period of the Vita even struggling to make sales, that Nintendo somehow managed to top the 2DS with its predecessor, the 3DS, which went on to sell over 75 million damn copies and is to this day marveled as a piece of ingenuity for the handheld history, genre, books, anything you want to say, brother. But hey, look, Sony did try and bring people to the Vita in 2013 when they released the PS Vita Slim, which is actually the version I got. And let me just tell you right now, this thing in every single metric and every single sort of system you can use to measure is worse than the original. But hey, it's a bit cheaper. Sony, what are we doing? And eventually with the system having only sold around 15 million units, like the number's a little bit shaky here, give or take a little bit more, a little bit less. On March the 1st of 2019, Sony announced after 8 years of providing and making Vitas, they were not only going to stop supporting the system, but also stop manufacturing it. And so, the Vita experiment had failed. With no one having cared for it and with the system having sold terribly, it had, and to be honest to this day, has been forgotten. Is kind of actually not that true, and it's actually kind of the complete opposite. Well, for some. You see, while Sony didn't care about the Vita itself, even to this day, the fan base is incredibly passionate about this little system, and man, is there a lot of good reasons for that. Firstly, in 2025, the homebrewing or modding scene, or whatever word you want to use to describe it, is at an all-time high, and seemingly the Vita is an incredible console or system for it. The system is great, the console is powerful, and thanks to the controls, you can pretty much play any system or any type of games you want on it. I don't really know how easy it is to mod because I'm a massive idiot, but from what I've heard and from what I've researched, as long as you're not a massive idiot like this guy, you should be fine. Wait, hang on a fucking minute, that's me! This console also for a long time was not only home to a plethora of amazing JRPGs, but also indie games. Instead of trying to remember these, I'm just gonna read them for you so I don't get the names wrong in case you want to play these, because some of these games are really quite great even now. With games like Freedom Wars, banger by the way, Bastion, Danganronpa, Persona, Undertale, Hotline Miami, which is actually how I first played the series on the Vita, which I think is a perfect way to play the game. And I mean, the list really does just go on. I actually wrote that and read that. The system had an incredible amount of love from the indie and JRPG side of gaming, with some of my own personal favorites being on this system. I'll never forget this one holiday I had where it's like 2 weeks before I was actually set off to this holiday with my family, and my dad came to me and was like, "Boy, you can get any game you want for the holiday on me." I don't know why I made him sound like crazy. I was 18, doesn't. I mean, I just did. But young, naive me had heard a lot, and I mean a lot, about Persona 4 Golden. So I got that, and well, 70 hours later, my first ever all-nighter where I played the game from all day to all day, and having completed the game before I even set off for the holiday, Persona 4 is not only one of my favorite games I've ever played, Persona 4 Golden if you want me to be exact, but that entire memory, that entire few weeks I had with the game, or few even days really, were actually, and still are to this day, one of my favorite memories I have from the medium. At the start of this video, I said that the failure of the Vita could be argued to be Sony's biggest failure, even more so than the absolute clusterfuck that was Concord. And by numbers or metrics or money lost at first glance, you'd be like, Jack, you are crazy. Of course Concord is the bigger failure for Sony. However, the failure of the Vita meant a lot more than just a failure of a handheld. It not only meant the failure of a brand new generation of handheld gaming from Sony, but it also meant the death of possibility and ingenuity from this little machine. If the Vita had sold well, very much like the PSP had, it's very possible right now that not only would we be waiting for the Switch 2, but we'd also be waiting for the PS Vita 2. Hopefully it has a better name. Hopefully it has a better name, okay, than that, but you get my point. The day the Vita died is also the same day that a beautiful new world of handheld gaming and, endless possibilities from the handheld world from Sony died with it. But it's also not just a terrible and somber story. I mean, it's evidently clear that the Vita failed from the players, from the numbers it sold, from the metrics, and I mean really any metric that you can use to quantify if the Vita failed, I mean it all points to a resounding yes. And if you were to purely just look at the numbers and results, you'd probably think the Vita was a terrible system and it deserved to fail. But that couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. It did birth some incredible IPs and series, with games like the Persona series being literal system sellers for the console. And look, I love the Persona series, it's one of my favorite series of all time, but like you have to give credit for the Vita for being the reason it was able to get into mainstream success. Like I'm sure it would have done it eventually without it, but the Vita was a big reason why it got there, right? Like the numbers, even though the Vita didn't sell great, the numbers do not lie. Like it was how I got into the series, and it was how a lot of people got into the series with Persona 4 Golden, and then eventually Persona 3 Fairs Portable, whichever version really you played. I think it was like more than 2, right? You're gonna be like, fake fan, whoop, whoop. Okay, but look, this system wasn't by any means perfect. It was expensive, lacked AAA games, had an awful storage system, and just couldn't really quite compete with the 3DS from Nintendo, and the damn monolith that was just a simple phone. However, since its release in 2012 or 2011, if you want to be pedantic, it's clear that not only Sony fans, but gaming fans in general are calling out for a handheld from Sony. With the highly anticipated Switch 2 right around the corner, and with seeing how well the Switch sold and how healthy the handheld gaming market is now with stuff like the Steam Deck,
Oh, for heaven's sake.
it feels like right now is the perfect time for Sony to take another swing, let me know if that sounded good, at the handheld market. Because let me tell you right now, if Sony release a good handheld, I'm buying that shit! But whether if Sony do or don't make another handheld, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I really hope they do. But the reason why I've just said it doesn't matter if we do get another handheld from Sony, it's because we did get an amazing handheld from Sony, and even a successor to the PSP. This guy right here. The PS Vita will go down in time as nothing but a failed machine by Sony, and many may not even remember it. But for many people like myself, and maybe even you watching at home, the PS Vita will go down as one of the most special systems you've ever played or owned. Not because it was this genre-defying handheld or because it was this amazing piece of gaming ingenuity, but because whilst this little machine right here may have failed, to many people like myself or others in general, this little machine right here was amazingly fun. It brought not just myself but many other people some amazing memories, not just from the medium, but in life in general. And for what it's worth, whilst the Vita failed for Sony, for the memories it brought me, for the medium and what it did for me, I'm incredibly grateful. And Sony, if you're listening, you owe us an apology for those damn memory cards.